The marriage of a beautiful young prince and 180-year-old beggar woman. This is such an astonishing incident that upon hearing it, your mind will be left utterly stunned. To fully understand this event, make sure to watch the video until the end. Thousands of years ago, a king ruled over the land of Sham. This king was extremely pious and had a very kind heart. The stories of his kindness had spread far and wide like wildfire. Whoever came to this king's court never left empty-handed. The king had a very handsome son. The name of this handsome young prince was Prince Shahroz. Friends, like his father, Prince Shahroz was also a very kind-hearted and well-mannered person. Unlike other princes, Prince Shahroz had no interest in wandering around. Instead, he would sit in the palace with his king father and listen to the people's problems and concerns. Prince Shahroz was a very wise, kind-hearted, and handsome young man. The kingdom, the king, and the prince were all deeply cherished by their people. The king was once seated in his court with his son beside him. Prince Shahroz was also sitting on the throne alongside his father. Everyone in the court was presenting their grievances. Suddenly, a beggar woman entered. This beggar had dark skin, tattered clothes, and a dishevelled appearance. Her hair was tangled, her garments were old and torn, and she looked like she hadn't bathed in days. The courtiers were astonished to see her. They whispered among themselves, calling her ugly. The beggar woman stepped forward and presented her plea before the king. The king asked, "Tell me, woman, what is your request?" The beggar woman revealed her yellowed teeth in a smile as eerie as her appearance, and then spoke. "O great king, I have heard much about you. I have heard endless praises of your generosity. They say that no one leaves your court empty-handed. I have only 2 wishes, and I ask you to fulfill just one of them." The beggar woman continued, "First, let me introduce myself. My name is Nagma. I am a beggar, and have been living in your city for a long time. I survive on alms, for I have no home, no wealth. I beg just enough to eat once a day. Now I wish to express my 2 desires, and I urge you to think carefully before making a decision." The king responded, "I always make well-thought-out decisions, and if ever I'm about to make a mistake, my wise and intelligent son is here to advise me. I never make rash choices. Now tell me what you seek." The old beggar woman took a deep breath and said, "My first wish is that I should be executed immediately by Prince Shahroz's sword, that my head should be severed from my body." The moment she spoke these words, the entire court, including the king and the prince, was stunned. Everyone turned to look at her in shock, believing she had gone mad. The king, frowning in disbelief, said, "Are you in your right mind? Why would we do such a thing? We do not execute anyone without reason. You have committed no crime. We only sentence people to death when they are guilty of a grave offense, but you have done nothing wrong." The beggar woman, still smiling, replied, "O king, if you do not wish to kill me by the prince's hands, then fulfill my second wish. Marry me to Prince Shahroz." The moment these words left her lips, the entire court erupted in shock. It felt as if steam was rising from the ears of everyone present. The king, the prince, and all the courtiers stood up in disbelief. The lawyers, ministers, and judges present instinctively reached for their swords, ready to strike at the king's command. The king, now furious, ordered the guards, "Arrest this woman at once!" But the beggar woman merely smiled. And when she smiled, revealing her yellowed teeth, it was as terrifying as her presence itself. Both the king and the prince felt a strange fear rising within them. Nevertheless, following the king's command, the guards apprehended the beggar and imprisoned her. The news of this bizarre request spread like wildfire throughout the kingdom. Meanwhile, the king retreated to his private chamber with his most trusted advisers, his ministers, lawyers, and Prince Shahroz. He was deeply troubled. "Who is this strange beggar, and what kind of demand has she made?" the king murmured, struggling to understand the situation. The lawyer spoke up and said, "O great king, give me the order, and I shall execute this beggar. How dare she make such demands, either to be killed by the prince's hands or to be married to him?" However, the king was a just ruler. If he ordered her execution, he would be responsible for an unjust killing, and he could not allow that. After all, desiring marriage was not a crime. The king could neither have her executed, nor could he agree to marrying off his handsome young son to this beggar woman. The minister then said, "Your Majesty, this ugly woman is merely testing your generosity." At that moment, the queen, Prince Shahroz's mother, spoke up in anger. "Not only is she so old, but her appearance is so repulsive that even looking at her makes one feel disgusted. My son is as radiant as the moon, and yet she dares to propose marriage to him. Does she feel no shame in saying such things? This ugly old woman should be given 100 lashes and then beheaded." Everyone in the court was offering their opinions, and all of them were against the beggar woman. The king then turned to his son and asked, "My son, what do you think? Use your wisdom and suggest a solution. On one hand, we have an innocent life at stake, and on the other, she has committed no crime by asking for marriage. Simply making such a request is not a sin, so we cannot kill her for it. My son, what do you think we should do?" Prince Shahroz replied, "Father, this old beggar woman presented 2 wishes. The first was that I should be the one to execute her. If she had any hidden motives, she would never have made that her first request. Instead, she would have directly asked for marriage. Furthermore, she told you about her background and struggles first. If her sole aim was to marry me, she wouldn't have mentioned her past at all. Father, I see something unusual in this situation. When we ordered her imprisonment, she showed no fear. Instead, she smiled, as if everything was going exactly as she had planned." The prince continued, "O father, my advice is that you speak to her in private. Ask her why she has made such an unusual request. If she wanted to test your generosity, she could have simply asked for wealth. Why did she insist on marrying me?" The wisdom in Prince Shahroz's words impressed the court, and the people began to realize that he was right. The matter needed to be investigated further. Following his son's advice, the king decided to meet the beggar woman alone. He asked her, "Tell me, why did you make these 2 strange wishes in front of everyone? What do you truly want?" But the beggar woman remained firm and replied, "My wishes remain the same. Either have me executed by the hands of the prince or marry me to him." The king tried to reason with her, saying, "I cannot have an innocent person killed, and my son is as young as your children. I cannot marry him to you. If it is wealth you seek, I can give you as much as you want." However, the beggar woman refused to listen and stubbornly held her ground. The king became furious at her persistence. He ordered the beggar woman to be imprisoned once again. Meanwhile, news of this hideous old beggar woman's bizarre request spread like wildfire throughout the entire kingdom. Thus, an old beggar woman wished to marry the prince. The king was deeply troubled. He could neither marry off his handsome young son to a beggar, nor could he unjustly have her killed. Meanwhile, the prince, known for his intelligence and wisdom, turned to his father and said, "O father, instead of burdening ourselves with the guilt of an unjust killing, let me marry her. If we kill her today without cause, what will people say about us tomorrow? They will accuse a just king of murdering an innocent beggar woman. That is something I cannot allow. Therefore, father, let me marry her. This is the only way forward." Hearing his son's words, the king was shaken as if he had been bitten by a venomous snake. He exclaimed, "My beloved son, do you truly want me to marry you off to this old, ugly beggar?" Prince Shahroz replied, "Father, this matter is on everyone's lips. It is being discussed everywhere. There is no way to silence it, and we cannot kill her either. So let me marry her. Whatever happens next will be as Allah wills. My fate will unfold as it is meant to." The king tried desperately to change his son's mind, but the prince was firm in his decision. "I cannot take her life with my own hands," he insisted, "so let me marry her instead." Seeing no other option, the king was forced to announce the next day that he had decided to marry his son to the old beggar woman. Upon hearing this, the courtiers, ministers, and advisers were left in utter shock. How could a prince, born in the palace, be married to an ugly beggar? The next day, the king carried out the wedding of his son to the old, disfigured beggar woman. The entire palace fell into complete silence, as if everyone had been struck dumb. The king was performing this ceremony out of sheer compulsion. As for the prince, he remained completely silent. His face showed neither joy nor sorrow. However, the old beggar woman seemed overjoyed. Then, as the final wedding ritual was completed and the king placed his son's hand in the hand of the beggar woman, something extraordinary happened. A loud explosion suddenly echoed through the palace, and a thick cloud of smoke surrounded the old beggar woman. The entire court was stunned. The smoke lingered for only a few moments, and when it cleared, where the old beggar woman once stood, there was now a breathtakingly beautiful princess. She wore an elegant royal gown, and a magnificent crown rested upon her head. The sight left everyone in the palace in absolute shock. The king stared, both amazed and bewildered. Just then, breaking the stunned silence, the beautiful young woman spoke. "I am that same old beggar woman." "The woman you have just married is me," the princess said. The king, overwhelmed with confusion, asked, "Tell us who that old beggar woman was and how you replaced her. What kind of magic is this? Who are you, and where is that old beggar now?" Prince Shahroz also stepped forward and questioned her. "Will you explain who you really are? And who was that hideous old woman? Why did she ask to marry me or be killed by my hands? What was the secret behind these two strange wishes? Please tell us everything in detail." The princess then began to narrate her story. "I am a princess from another kingdom. My father is a king, much like your father, a just and righteous ruler. I am his only child, and he raised me with great love and care. He fulfilled all my wishes, whether they were fair or unreasonable, which turned me into a spoiled and selfish person. I never cared for anyone. I did not respect my elders, nor did I show kindness to those younger than me. Over time, people started calling me the cruel princess because of my arrogance and mistreatment of others. Although my parents were noble and kind-hearted, I never listened to their guidance. I wore the finest clothes, ate the most luxurious food, and indulged in every pleasure. One of my favorite pastimes was hunting. One day, I set out with my guards to hunt in the forest. As I ventured deeper, I came across a peaceful and beautiful valley. It was a quiet, secluded paradise, filled with flowers in bloom and cascading waterfalls. When I looked to one side, the waterfalls flowed gracefully. When I turned the other way, the scent of flowers filled the air. I was enchanted by the valley. I decided that since it was within the borders of my kingdom, I would build a magnificent palace there for myself. But then I noticed a small, shabby hut standing in the middle of the valley. The sight of it displeased me. The very presence of that tiny hut in such a breathtaking place felt like an insult. Anger filled my heart. I went inside and saw an old woman deep in prayer. She was a pious woman devoted to the worship of Allah. I spoke to her and said, "Take your hut somewhere else. Go live and pray elsewhere. I love this valley, and I am going to build a grand palace here for myself." Hearing my words, the old woman looked at me with surprise. She was dressed in ragged, worn-out clothes that looked ancient, as if she had not changed them in years. She looked unclean and poor, and I wrinkled my nose in disgust at her appearance. Hatred welled up inside me just by looking at her. The old woman, however, smiled kindly and said, "It is wonderful that you wish to build a magnificent palace here. Do as you please, my child. But what does my small hut have to do with your palace? How would my humble home affect your grand estate? If you wish to build your palace, go ahead. I have no objection." Her words only enraged me further. I shouted, "How can a princess's palace stand in the same place as a broken-down hut? Move your wretched home elsewhere." I insulted her, calling her ugly, old, and filthy. I mocked her tattered clothes and said horrible things to her. Hearing my words, the old woman's expression changed. A divine wrath overtook her. She stood tall and, in a voice filled with authority, declared, "Those who worship Allah are never filthy, nor are they attached to the material world. I have no need for worldly luxuries, and I shall not move my hut from this place." "I have been worshipping here for years," the old pious woman had said. But when I heard her words, my anger flared up. I immediately ordered my servants to destroy her hut. In my fury, I insulted and cursed her, calling her filthy, wretched, and unworthy of living in such a beautiful place. I hurled every insult I could think of at her. Hearing my words, the old woman's face hardened with divine rage. Her calm demeanor disappeared, and she raised her hands in prayer. She cursed me, saying, "Just as you called me ugly and a beggar, you too shall become disfigured and destitute. Just as you pushed me away, your own family will abandon you. Your appearance will change so drastically that even your loved ones will refuse to recognize you." The moment she spoke these words, a deafening thunderclap shook the skies, and an explosion erupted around me. When the smoke cleared, I found myself not in the lush valley anymore, but standing in a busy market of my own kingdom. I looked down at myself in horror. My skin had turned black, my clothes were tattered and filthy, and my body reeked as if I hadn't bathed in days. My once beautiful hair was tangled and matted with dirt. I looked like a wretched beggar. I screamed in terror, realizing that the old woman's curse had taken effect. As I wandered through the streets, people looked at me with disgust. When I tried to return to my palace, the guards at the gates forcefully pushed me away. "I am the princess!" I cried out, but they only laughed and mocked me. No one recognized me. When I tried to convince people of my identity, they thought I was insane. The pious old woman had truly turned me into an outcast, a beggar, an unworthy creature. For months I roamed the streets, living off the scraps people threw at me. Some gave me alms out of pity, while others shoved me aside in disgust. I was ridiculed and treated worse than dirt. I desperately tried to find my way back to that enchanted valley, to beg for forgiveness, but no matter how much I searched, the valley seemed to have vanished from existence. One day, by chance, I finally saw the old woman again. Overcome with relief, I ran to her and fell at her feet, sobbing uncontrollably. I begged her for forgiveness, crying and pleading, admitting my arrogance and cruelty. Seeing me in such despair, she was moved with pity. She finally spoke and said, "You can only regain your original form if a prince agrees to marry you, but the marriage must be of his own free will, with the blessing of his father, the king. He must not be forced into it, and he must not know your true identity." Hearing her words, my heart sank. Who would ever marry a wretched beggar like me? Even common men looked at me with disgust and shoved me aside. How could I ever hope for a prince to choose me as his bride? So how could any prince or king ever agree to marry me? I asked the pious old woman. She replied, "There are still many just and kind-hearted people in this world." With those words, she left. After that, I spent months wandering through the streets, suffering humiliation at every turn. Whenever I approached someone, they would push me away, insult me, and drive me out. Then I joined a caravan and traveled with them. And that was when I heard about you. I learned of your immense generosity and the tales of your kindness that had spread far and wide. Even then, I had no hope that a prince would ever marry me or that a king would agree to wed his son to me. I had accepted my fate. But when I heard about you, a small flicker of hope awakened in my heart. I was already deeply ashamed of my past arrogance. I often cried, remembering the days when I was full of pride and selfishness. Every night, I begged Allah for forgiveness, pleading to be returned to my true form. Then I learned about your royal court, and I decided to come to your palace. I placed two choices before you, either to have the prince execute me or to have him marry me. I was ready for either outcome. If the prince had killed me, I would have been freed from this miserable and disgraceful life. And if he chose to marry me, then I knew that I would return to my original form. And now, standing before you in my true self, I have learned the true meaning of generosity, the purpose of life, and the way one should truly live. I seek forgiveness from Allah for my past sins, and I express my gratitude to you, O great King. You are truly a just and merciful ruler, and I consider myself the luckiest woman in the world for being given such a wise and noble prince as my husband. Hearing her words, the king embraced the princess warmly and welcomed her into his palace as his son's wife. The princess and Prince Shahroz lived happily in the royal palace, sharing a life filled with joy and understanding. Meanwhile, in her own kingdom, the princess's father had grown gravely ill with worry over his missing daughter. But when he saw her return, safe and sound, he was overjoyed. From that day forward, the princess transformed completely. She began to respect the young and honor the elders. With a compassionate heart, she ruled justly and with kindness. She had repented for her past mistakes and now understood the true purpose of life. In gratitude, she sent for the pious old woman and gave her a special room in the palace, saying, "Mother, you may stay here and worship in peace." And so, dear friends, we hope you found this story inspiring. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you.